Today I'll be talking about one of my favorite subjects, aliens. I'll be talking about star seeds, Pleiadians, Annunaki, the Nephilim, and those cute little Mexican mummies. Here we go. I've been very obsessed, especially the last month, with the idea of aliens and UFOs and angels and demons and all of that fun stuff, right? So I've been asking everybody that I come in contact with essentially what their thoughts are on life outside of Earth. And the results are unexpected and fascinating, and that's what we're going to dive into today. But I've been really poring over my belief system this week because a part of my spiritual awakening, part of this spiritual journey that I've found myself on, I question everything. I question everything. I question the government. I question the pharmaceutical industry. I question our history, right? I question why I respond this way, why I react that way, why just everything. I like to dive into it and really just ask why I have certain beliefs within my belief system. And for those of you that have gone on a spiritual journey, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's that internal journey. And so I've been on the edge of my seat watching these congressional hearings, both here in the States and in Mexico. And I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed. I kind of expected, and maybe you did as well, I kind of expected this big reveal, right? This is disclosure. Humanity gets to meet our stellar brothers and sisters, or overlords, who knows? That's TBD on that one. But I'm still not convinced. And since I was disappointed after watching the hearings, I mean, if you didn't watch it, it was basically the U.S. congressional hearings were agents of the government, whether in military or otherwise. They were talking about how there have been firsthand accounts and multiple sightings. And I mean, the government just upgraded their radar technology recently, like in the last year. And they would see blips on the radar that were unexplained, UAPs or UFOs or whatever you want to call them. And the pilots kind of knew that they were out there and to keep an eye out for them, right? But then they upgraded their technology recently. And this radar technology, they saw hundreds and thousands of new blips that they hadn't seen before that were just sitting out there, not moving, right? These cubes, these clear, invisible cubes with spheres inside of them that we have no idea what the hell they are. Whether it's, Chinese drone technology or extraterrestrial technology is still up in the air, right? And then in the Mexican congressional hearings about it, they brought in 2 ancient artifacts that were mummified aliens, allegedly, right? And they did a bunch of tests on them and determined that 1/3 of their DNA is non-terrestrial. So that's cool, right? What does that mean? One of the aliens had 3 eggs inside of its belly, right? Okay, that's a little weird. So it sort of makes me excited because I'm like, yes, finally we're getting to see real evidence. But then that's negated by the fact that the guy that brought these alien mummies is a known charlatan. He's presented mummies that have been cobbled together, these alleged alien mummies that are cobbled together with the bones and skulls fragments from, animals or children or small, whatever, to make it look like an alien. So this guy is a bit of a fraud. And this is the guy that they're bringing in front of the Congress. I'm like, really? This is the best we got? It's a little disappointing because I just want to believe. And I nowadays, I got to see it with my own eyes. I got to see enough. I really rely on my intuition is what's going on here. And my intuition is saying, I'm going to need a little bit more, guys. I'm going to need a little bit more. But are those mummies real? Sure. I mean, nothing nowadays would surprise me, right? Nothing's going to blow my mind and be like, what? But I still am waiting for the big reveal, and I just don't think we're there yet. And so I, of course, think that most reasonable, rational human beings are like, yes, of course, there's probably life out there. It's a large universe. And so I was just fascinated asking people because the answers are across the board, right? And I found that, and this is not, scientific by any means whatsoever, right? But I just did informal polling asking people, and I found that people who consider themselves religious, meaning they go to church at least once a week and pray to God regularly, most people who consider themselves religious do not tend to not believe that there's other life out there. And I find that very interesting. And I looked online at some other polls that reflected the same sentiment, that those that consider themselves religious tend to not believe in alien life, right? I asked one person, and they said that yes, they do believe in aliens, but that they believe that the aliens are demons. And I said, well, I haven't heard that before. Elaborate, please. I love having these conversations because I have an open mind. I feel like the old version of me used to have a very closed mind, very black and white. There was my opinion, which was the correct opinion, and your opinion is wrong and you're an idiot. Okay, that's the old version of myself. But the new version of me is much more open, right? And I love hearing, because other people's opinions and belief systems, I've trained myself, I've practiced not letting that affect me, right? Not let it shake the core of who I am. Now I'm just sort of open to anything and everything. And I'm like, oh, I like that perspective. Tell me more, please. So if you look at the book of Enoch, the book of Enoch is one of those ancient scriptures that was left out of the Bible, right? And I plan on dedicating a whole episode to just talking about these ancient scriptures that were left out of the Bible, the reasons why they were left out of the Bible, what they contain. It's all really interesting, so stay tuned for that, for those of you that are into that sort of thing. But the book of Enoch talks about these beings called the Nephilim, okay? And Nephilim is, I think it's Hebrew, and it translates to fallen ones, okay? And according to the scriptures, they were giants, which I also find interesting because there are tales of giants in like nearly every ancient culture. So I find that interesting, in the same way that the Great Flood was also mentioned in basically every ancient culture, right? And so it makes me think that perhaps that these things aren't myths, that they actually did happen. And so all of these ancient cultures talk about how after the flood, after the Great Reset, that giants came from the water. Some accounts say that they came from the sky or from the heavens, right? In order to help humanity, in order to restart civilization after the Great Reset. And it's hard because there are contradictions, right? In some accounts, these giants help humanity, and in other accounts, they are demons, and they are like the Nephilim in the book of Enoch. No bueno. It talks about how they create chaos and corruption and immorality and sin, and how they taught humans, quote unquote, forbidden knowledge that God didn't want them to know about, right? Didn't want us to know about, which also goes hand in hand with the Adam and Eve and tree of knowledge story in Genesis. The ancient Gnostics, the early Christians, believed that there was this forbidden knowledge that God didn't want us to know about. And so it's just these themes that are kind of woven through all of the myths and the tales that's handed down generation to generation that fascinates me. And so in the book of Enoch, it tells the story about how there were these angels sent from God to look after Earth, to look after humanity. And they were called the Watchers, which is a pretty badass name if we're being real. And so at some point, as the story goes, these Watchers started getting a little hot and heavy with the human women down below on Earth. And they had relations with these human women. And the abomination that came out, the child that came from that, was the Nephilim, the fallen one. And so God gets pissed off that these watchers, these angels, fornicated with the human women, and that their bastard children were going around ruining everything, chaos, right? And so that's why God causes the great flood, according to the book of Enoch. And God said that he would bound the angels, these watchers, to earth forever until judgment day. And he tried to wipe the Nephilim from the face of the planet with the flood, although some accounts say that they survived and are still here. So it's just interesting. In the book of Genesis, it talks about a very similar thing, right? Where beings come from the sky / heaven, depending on how... These are all open to interpretation, too. Like, if you read these scriptures, it doesn't clearly say what these things are. It's very open to interpretation. And there's the ancient Sumerian stories of the Annunaki. The Annunaki is Sumerian. It translates those who came from the sky. Like, it's just this theme over and over and over again. In some of the hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt, you see these pictures of things that could be interpreted as flying saucers or beings coming from the sky. You see that their gods have these bird heads or lizard heads. And it just makes you wonder if those were extraterrestrials, shapeshifters, or reptilians, because I had never heard of any of these extraterrestrials. When I started diving deep into the spiritual community, right, and listening to YouTube videos and stuff, I started hearing a lot about reptilians and Pleiadians and Arcturians and Syrians and Andromedans and mantids and grays, the gray aliens with the big eyes. Like, I had no idea that there's so many species out there, right? And I love the idea that we're surrounded by all of these other species that come from our galaxy that theoretically are humanoid just like us. Like, I love that idea. I love the idea that perhaps, a million years ago, one of these ancient species came to this planet and seeded the planet, or crossed their DNA with our DNA back when we were primitive, right? The idea that we're this hybrid species, right? Part alien, part human, just like the mummies that were presented before the Mexican Congress. I mean, a third of their DNA was non-terrestrial, indicating that there are some sort of a hybrid species between them and us. There are people who consider themselves a star seed, that they were planted here from a distant star system. Perhaps our spirit is Pleiadian. Perhaps our spirit is originally from Arcturus, right? Or whatever. And we're now living this reincarnation cycle through the human body, right? Because theoretically there are species out there that don't require a physical body, a physical vessel, such as angels or these ethereal beings or energy, having an energy body or a light body, right? That's just pure energy. I love the concept that perhaps Earth is some sort of a nursery of sorts, right? That we're growing and evolving with these benevolent beings that are watching over us, protecting us, and perhaps that's why there hasn't been this big reveal, is because it's not time yet. We're being prepped for that. The word apocalypse just means revealing, to reveal something. It doesn't mean end of the world. It doesn't mean death and destruction and blah. It just means a revealing, an awakening perhaps, right? An awakening that we're not the only species out there. But then in questioning everything, I question the accounts that say that we have a firmament or a dome that is over this plane of reality, this earth or whatever, right? And if there is this dome over us, and it sounds, and I know that science laughs at this sort of thing, right? But in being open-minded and saying, well, really at the end of the day, we can't be 100% sure about anything. We can have experts tell us A, B, or C, but at the end of the day, there were experts thousands of years ago that were the truth. I mean, at one point, the accepted knowledge was that Earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around it, right? And nobody questioned that. And if you did question it, you would probably be killed by the church / state, right? Until people like Galileo come along and say, actually, guys, you might have this thing wrong. The sun is actually in the middle and we're all going around it. And they didn't like that, right? Most humans don't like to question things like that, question their belief systems. But that's what this is a part of, right? Is saying, yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess. And so if there is this firmament over the earth, maybe there are no aliens out there. Maybe that's just a part of the illusion. And I had to ask myself, like, can I accept that maybe there actually aren't aliens out there? Because initially that would kind of bum me out. But at the end of the day, I suppose that is an option, right? There's just so much that we don't understand about any of this stuff, right? And people are so firm in their beliefs. They are demons, and I will not be convinced otherwise. There is no life out there, and you can't convince me otherwise. Harumph. Because I think that even if there were aliens that were, presented on TV by the White House and say, okay, well, here it is. Here's our alien brothers. I still think that there would be a major portion of the population that still would say, no, bullshit. No, they're faking it, because we're living in a world now with AI created images. It's very confusing what's real and what's not real. We're being asked more than ever now to rely on our own intuition. And that's something that I've been honing and learning to listen to over the last several years. But the old version of myself, I didn't listen to my intuition. I didn't even know what that meant, right? I just listen to what the scientists tell me and the government tells me or whatever. And that's that. Why would I question it? I don't think that they're here to harm us either, by the way. Like, I think that if they are as advanced as they probably are, I think that they would have destroyed us by now if that was their agenda, right? There's also a lot of speculation in certain circles that there are beings here from perhaps another dimension, right, that are using us for our energy, that they're creating this. I mean, it's very conspiratorial, right? But that's where we're at, okay? That there's these beings that are promoting fear on this planet, whether it's the reptilian shapeshifters or, like the Annunaki or whatever, but like this concept that they're creating this fear on our planet in order to feed off of that negative energy in some way. It's fascinating. So when people ask me what I believe, I say, yeah, I believe they're out there. But at the end of the day, I don't know, because now I'm starting to rethink it all. And I suppose until I see one with my own eyes, or I'm convinced via my intuition, I'm still on the fence. I really want to believe, but I'm trying to just remain as open-minded as I can and open to the possibility that this might all just be bullshit. It might all just be an illusion, right? And when I start questioning and thinking about angels and demons and aliens and all that stuff, I start thinking about mythological creatures like dragons and mermaids and elves and all of that stuff. And I start to question, like, who knows? Maybe at some point they were on this planet. I mean, I definitely believe that there could have been ancient civilizations like Atlantis that are now under the water, because I think that there are periods of reset on this planet. And whether that reset is a flood or the magnetic poles of the planet flipping, or a solar flare, right? I just think that there's these resets that happen for reasons unknown, right? That's what I love to hypothesize. But as above, so below. I've had my own series of personal resets, right? Just like completely resetting who I used to be, completely resetting my belief system, completely resetting how I respond to things, etc., right? I've had these resets in my life. And so as above, so below, it just sort of goes out into infinity, these patterns and these cycles. And if the magnetic poles on this planet flip, theoretically, it would just be like shaking a globe. You would get all new continents. The whole thing would be, rejiggered. The whole thing would be reset. And it gets a little bit into AI and how AI plays into all of this. Whether or not that's a part of the natural evolution of species throughout the galaxy as AI starts to just become incorporated into their civilization rather than something to be scared about. I don't know. Because when I first started this spiritual journey, I just sort of, my intuition started kicking in. And I started getting these feelings. I started feeling like something big is coming, an event, right? And I'm not the only one. As I start digging in, I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one. And of course, people have been shouting from the streets, shouting from the rooftops that the end of the world is coming, the end is nigh, right? So this is not a new concept that, oh, well, something big is coming. But I just feel it. Whether, if AI starts to take over, for example, you can't just unplug the internet. Right? You can't just turn that thing off, which is what the fear is, that if it starts turning on us, that we won't be able to stop it. But I think that God, the universe, our creator, has these mechanisms to halt things, to reset things. And so the sun puts out these solar flares, right? And it's called an X level. If there's an X level solar flare that happens to hit Earth, it would completely fry our entire electrical system, theoretically knocking us back to the Stone Age. If the United States lost power, it would be complete chaos within a month. But perhaps this is the type of thing that is needed in order to reset the internet, in order to kill the AI, in order to it's the story of the Tower of Babel in the Bible. Humanity got a little too big for their britches and started building this tower to try to reach heaven, to try to reach the gods. And at some point, God slapped that tower to the ground. That's a reset. And so I think that once civilization reaches a certain point, for whatever reason, I don't think it's good or bad. It's just a part of what happens on this planet, perhaps, that every 10,000 years or so, we go through a reset. It's so interesting to me that there's all of these ancient civilizations, these ancient pyramids that are just buried under the jungle or buried under the ocean or buried under, the sand or the earth. And it's just, it blows my mind that there's all of these civilizations that perhaps we don't know about, right? Or that we're completely misinterpreting. And the timeline that we've been told is perhaps incorrect, right? So it's a fascinating conversation. I love talking about it, and I love, thinking about all of the what ifs. And but at the end of the day, I try not to latch on too much to it. I try not to latch on to expectations, right? I think that humanity has a habit of searching for a savior, searching for somebody to save them, rather than looking within and learning to save themselves. Not relying on external things to save them, but looking within to save themselves, to free themselves. This has been a part of my journey because I learned that when I rely on things on the external, oftentimes I will be disappointed, right? Whether I'm relying on a religious figure or experience, or relying on family or friends or government or anything external to my own self, is going to ultimately lead to unfulfillment and disappointment and frustration. And I think that there's a portion of the population, I was there for a bit, like, I just want these aliens to get me out of here. Like, can you just take me on your ship and get me off this hellhole that we call Earth? But what I've been learning to do, what I've been practicing, is to find that peace and contentment no matter what, no matter where I'm at, whether I'm on this quote-unquote piece of junk planet, right? Or I can learn to love it and appreciate it and be thankful for it, thankful for the beauty, thankful for what is going right, rather than focusing on all of the things that are negative and going wrong. When I started diving into conspiracy land and tinfoil hat land, there was a lot of victimhood that was available to me. I could say, yeah, they did this to us, or they're the bad guys, or they're causing this, or any of that. But I'm no longer looking to be saved. I'm learning to find peace and happiness and contentment exactly where I am in this exact moment. No more wishing and hoping for something better, realizing that what is best is what is happening right now. That's why it's happening. It's easy to get hooked and roped in, and then you're always looking to some future event, waiting for some future savior to save you from something, rather than living in the present moment. I know that I'm here for a reason. I know that I'm exactly where I need to be, and that everything is playing out exactly as it's meant to be playing out, not just on a personal level, but also on a cosmic level. Everything is unfolding as it's meant to, in its own time. And it's hard I'm speaking for myself, not to get antsy. Like, come on already, I'm so excited to see the aliens. But to accept that that might not play out the way that I want it to play out in my head, right? Because then that's just going to lead to disappointment, theoretically. If it doesn't play out the way that I want, I'm going to be really let down. Well, I don't like playing that game. And so I've stopped that pattern in my own life, released my attachment to how I think I want things to play out, how I would like things to play out. So that way, whether or not the aliens come and there is a big reveal, I'm okay with it. Because at the end of the day, I think we're all in a simulation, so none of it matters anyways. End transmission!